All right, welcome back. We are game engine design and implementation. So that's INFR3110U in the fall 2020 semester at Ontario Tech, and it's week 5, and we're in the midterm test. So I'm here as to kind of provide Q&A. I'm going to bring up the test at this point. I have to say that obviously, since I'm producing this on YouTube, then next year when this is done, of course the test will be different than this one. So we'll see what happened by then. But let's put it up right now and talk about what the test is like. So what are we doing, and what is this about? So I'm going to bring this up. Now you guys should already have seen it, and I know that Nicholas had a chance to get together with you guys to go over it with you, which I'm happy about. I know that you guys had a pretty good tutorial from that perspective, so he went over stuff that you needed to make sure that things were okay. So let me just pull this up now, and we'll talk about it together. It looks big. It looks really big, but it's really more or less it's doable. Okay, so let's get into this thing a little bit. So what I asked for the base. So the first thing was I said, okay, so here's the base, and you're making a Unity scene, and you're making a start scene, a play scene, and an end scene. So are you guys good with doing this? The first part. And I'm just going to take, if you're good, then from the participants here, what I'm hoping is that you can kind of say yay or nay, because I know there's not many of you here, but you know, okay, so people are good. Keelan and Kennedy. That's great. And Roderick, you look like you're going to be good. Xavier, can I get some more feedback from you? Or maybe Carter. Carter's good. How are we doing, How? Are you going to be okay as well?
Because of the swap and the interrelation between the swap.
All right. So it looks like at least most of us are going to be good, the people that have attended. So that's the first part. So the first part is, the base, which is, hey, I know how to switch scenes. Next part is your start scene should include a simple menu that allows the player to start the game. So that's like just using a canvas. That's pretty simple stuff. Here's where we get a little bit more challenging. So the play scene, you create a simple maze. There's a lot of ways to do this kind of simple maze stuff. Okay, so one of the ways that's a really quick and dirty way to do it is to use Blender, right? So let's suppose that I want to make a quick maze with Blender. As an example, I'm gonna see if I can crank up my Blender over here before my system breaks. All right, we'll see if it's actually going to work today. And whenever this kind of thing happens, it's usually because I'm taxing my system to death. That's what it is right now, because I'm kind of broadcasting and doing a bunch of stuff all together at the same time. This is not a good sign though for Blender. That means that either Blender is stopped. I've got some kind of crazy thing happening with Blender. Right, that's what it says here. It says it's trying to read my preferences for Blender 2.9, and also it could be that my Blender link is dead. Let's just try and see if I can get it done another way. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Isn't that awesome when you're doing a presentation and just Blender's not working, but it'll work every other time except for this time? Yeah, it is what it is. That's the kind of stuff that happens. All right, so we're going to just not do Blender right now. But anyway, the point is you can make a very simple scene. That's terrible. That's really embarrassing. With Blender. And so what I'll do is just sometimes what can happen is if I download Blender again, blender.org is where you want to go. Sometimes it gets blocked because of, let's say, some kind of something I'm doing 3D wise on my system, and it shouldn't be that bad because it's only about 160 megs and I got pretty good download speed, so it would be okay. Worst case scenario, I'll just launch it from a brand new download, which is totally fine. But I want to show you what you could do with it in a second. All right, so again, make a simple maze. You can use different things. You can import assets into Unity. You can use Blender. You can use whatever tool you feel like that is cool like that. Some people want to use Pro Builder in Unity, or they want to use simple blocks in Unity and then just add to them. I mean, obviously, it's not going to look as nice from if you just use the blocks built into Unity. That's totally fine. So, you know, I mean, like I said, it is what it is, but you want to kind of create a simple maze, and it doesn't have to be very complex at all. Some people ask me if when you're creating your maze, does it really have to be crazy? And the answer is no, it doesn't. You can make a maze that will last for a couple minutes if you're going to play it, and as long as it's reasonable, and I mean that in that way, reasonable, then it shouldn't be an issue, you know, kind of thing. So if it's really short, if there's no maze, like, you know, literally, if you just made it so it's like way too short, or if you made it really long for yourself, you know, these are things that I don't recommend. But some people, you know, it's all based on judgment and scope, right? Some people will make a crazy thing for, you know, because they want to push themselves, or whatever. Some people want to make it so that it is procedurally generated, the maze, and that's totally fine too. That's part of one of the bonuses that I kind of indicated below, right? While we're downloading and installing Blender, that would be pretty awesome if it actually works this time around. It may not. We'll see what happens. Okay, so let's get back into that document because I wanted to make sure I go through it. So you make your maze. Okay, and this one, people ask me about this one. Your maze should challenge the player with potential falls and dead ends. So to me, what this means is, you know, maybe there's going to be a ramp on the maze or whatever, so that the player might have a chance to fall off, or maybe a narrower area in a path on the maze. As an example, or maybe it's going to just be a hole that makes the player fall onto the death plane. There's a lot of ways you can do this kind of stuff. The dead ends, obviously, you know, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but for the most part, you know, I think actually I could probably launch Blender now. Let's take a look. Blender, come on, Blender. Blender's not going to launch for me, guys. I have a really terrible feeling about this, but I don't think it's gonna work. I think it's blocked up right now, and it's a bad thing. I was hoping that it was gonna happen, but you know how it is. Sometimes just things don't go, and it could be because I'm broadcasting. It could be 10 to 10. Oh wait, oh my God, it did work. It just needed a little bit more time for some reason. All right, so yeah, so let's go back to that maze example thing. So I obviously don't want a cube here. Let's just get rid of the cube. So let's suppose that I want to make a really interesting one. So one of my tricks has always been make a plane, right? And what I want to do is I want to scale it up a lot. Let's say like, I don't know, 30 times or something insane. So there we go. There's something that's scaled up about a bunch, right? And if that's too much, let's undo that change. Let's just scale it up, you know, by I, right? So, you know, let's say we'll make it so that it's like a bunch of blocks, something like looks like this. This is like a maze tile, let's say, right? And then what you can do is you can obviously cut it up. So I'll tab into edit mode, and then I'll kind of select subdivide tool, right? And in the subdivide tool, what you can do is you can select a bunch of subdivisions. So let's say, for example, I don't know, I want to have 8 subdivisions or something like that. And you want to kind of break it down so that it makes sense. Okay, that looks good, all right? So now that you have your subdivisions, right, you can go into something like, you know, edit mode, right? And what you want to do, and this is kind of, like I said, a trick that I've always done, is you want to kind of, you know, select, you know, the path in the maze. So let's say, for example, I want to make a maze, so it starts there, and this is one of my maze tiles as an example, and I'm just going to make another maze tile like this. So this is something as simple as you can do it, right? So you kind of make your layout with Blender, something that looks like this, or something maybe nicer than this. And what you can do with it is, if you have one of the tiles here, let's just put this like this, you can grow this thing up, right? Yeah, that looks about right. And now usually I leave about 2 tiles up, but let's say now what I want to do is I want to extrude it. So I press the E key to extrude, and then I press E again, and I want to go up like 2 meters, something like that. So instantly what happens is you got this thing, right? And if this doesn't make any sense, as an example, you know, it's okay. It may not, you know, let's go up by, you know, 4 meters, or, you know, God forbid, let's go up by 3 meters, something like that. Okay, so something in that range, so that the maze is going to be high enough so people can't escape. Okay, that kind of stuff. All right, so that's what I would do. Once you've got your maze tile, as an example, you can export this thing into Unity. And again, all it is just literally like a plane that's been exported. So this is definitely one way of doing it. Then what you can do is you can snap these tiles together. You can make a series of these with different configurations, snap them together, maybe some configurations that have dead ends, as an example, and then you're good to go. So that's kind of one way of doing your maze. And if I was to bring up, let's bring up Unity for a second, right? And we'll export this thing in, and let's just go to a new project. We'll make a new project. We'll make it make it 3D, and we'll call this INFR3110, and we'll say midterm demo. Okay. And again, what I want to do is I want to put this in the right spot. So this is where this is, and let's create this one. So while Unity is doing its job, and that's doing that, I'll show you how I would put it probably together. You guys should probably know how to do this anyway, but I'm just going to go about it just in case, you're not there. But for most people, you probably are. This is way too late for me to show you this. You probably already have everything you need. Okay, let's go to the next part. A UI element that will display a running score or progress bar. Lots of ways to do this. I like to make a score manager, which kind of holds on to my score. You can also use scriptable objects, and maybe later in the semester I'll get Nick to show you how to do scriptable objects if you don't know how to do that, which is kind of really cool. And your maze should include walls, shifting platforms, and a death plane. Okay, so people kind of send me an email saying, I don't know what do you mean by death plane? That can mean a lot of things, and I want to keep it simple when I talk about this, what I mean. So again, if I was going to start off with Unity, I would kind of go into, let's make a new folder. We'll call this folder scripts. And I want to rejig my scene. So again, I probably would rename this thing. Let's go into scenes and do that there for a second. So we'll rename this thing to main, just to have an example of that scene. And under my assets, we'll actually put in some models, which is where we're going to drop our little model from Blender, and we're also going to put another folder for prefabs. Okay, so basic stuff, nothing too crazy. I want to get some models from Blender now, and my Blender, which somehow is turned out to be functioning, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Did it die? Where is it? Oh, it's here. It's just not showing up. That's fine. So I'm going to export this one. So let's export the model as an FBX as an example. And I'm just going to drop this in my downloads. So we'll just call this maze tile 1. Maze tile 1.fbx. Export. Export as FBX. This is important too when you do your export, and I'm sure you know this already, but the options that you put in are important. So this is Z forward as an example, and Y up. This is kind of a typical export selection. You can export everything. You can limit it to just the model. So all I care about is I don't care about the armature. I only care about the mesh. So I don't care about the camera or anything empty, that kind of stuff, just this alone. And it says bake animation. Sure, it doesn't matter. And just export. So now that I got that model exported, and if everything went well, then I should be able to bring up should be able to bring my stuff up here. So let's get to downloads, and there's my maze tile 1, right? I'm going to drag and drop my maze tile 1 right into my folder here if I can, and there it is. There's my maze tile, and I'll bring that right into the scene, right? And you can see that immediately you've got a tile. So it's pretty quick, right? There are some issues here, and one of the things to do before I do that, so let me just undo that change. Over here, when I import, the model itself has some options when you import it, as you know, but let's talk about them a little bit. So the model scale factor is 1. I definitely want to create, if I can, I want to calculate my colliders ahead of time. So where it says generate colliders, I want to press that for sure. That'll help. Because when I bring it in, there's different kinds of colliders that can kind of be brought in. Rigging, obviously there's no rig. Animation, there's no animation. And materials, sometimes what I like to do is separate my materials if I have separate textures for each one of these things. For now, I'm going to leave it as they're embedded, but we can separate that out later on. Scale factor, like I said, is 1, and I think this is pretty good. Let's apply that change, and then maybe I'll just drag and drop that in. All right, cool. So I've got the material, and I need some kind of, let's just do a top-down view. So I'm just going to kind of go to a top-down view here for the maze. There we go. And let's go orthographic, so you can kind of see where it's at, right? And what you can do with it, even though it's 3D, of course you can just Control D, which will duplicate the maze tile. And then what you can do is you can kind of bring it out. If you use the V key, you can do V snapping to snap the maze into place. Make sure sometimes it snaps it at a different point in time. And then what we can do is we can rotate this thing. So again, this is just ways of doing stuff. There's a million ways to do this thing, same thing. But I want to rotate this, and if you know, you can try different things. You can try Y rotation, which makes sense. So I want to rotate it across the Y-axis 90 degrees. So it's the same maze tile as an example, right? But the idea is that, and this will bring it in there. So we can see the V snapping didn't do me any good at all, because it snapped it on one side but didn't snap the heights. So I can bring that down to the Z-axis or the Y-axis to the same. So you can see that now, even though I made a very simple tile, right? I did that, and you can just duplicate this, and this is again with no textures or anything, but this idea is you can build a maze within minutes, right? So that's not going to take you a long time. Okay, so that's just, I'm just going to go through it like this. I know this is maybe a little tedious for some people, and I do apologize. If you're already way past this stage, bear with me, because there's some people that this might help, right? How about a controller? What do I do for, to make a controller for this? Did you guys make your own first-person controller? What did you guys do? Or a third-person controller? I mean, for the most part, that's the one thing that is the most difficult part of moving stuff around, right? What did you guys do? You made did you make it, Carter, or did you download it? What did you do? Roger did third person. That's good. Kennedy did first person. I did in a weird way. It's mildly janky, but I try my best. Yeah, I know. I mean, one of the things when you're making a controller, you got to think about what you're doing. So let's add I'm just going to make a capsule kind of object. Tank controls look good for me. It doesn't matter. So let's just add in a capsule. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go into 3D object, and let's add a capsule. So there's a capsule. And let's just frame select that. It's way below where it's supposed to be. Let's bring that thing so that we can actually see it, and maybe bring it where it's supposed to be, like over here. Sorry, I'm going to use my fly-through controls to see where I'm at with it. So that's a wonderful thing. Perspective is a wonderful thing. All right, so yeah, there we go. So let's just do that again. We'll still way too low. All right, we'll bring that in there. All right, so yeah, there it is. There's my guy. This is going to be my player character, and I'm going to start him here at this part of the maze. Let's do a couple things. First of all, he's got a capsule collider built in, but I definitely need some kind of rigid body. So I add a rigid body in there. There he is. And if I play the scene now, theoretically, if we did everything correctly, then he shouldn't fall through. We're saying, right? So that's the idea. So there he is. So that's the camera. But where is the capsule? So if I go to the scene, yeah, we can see that the capsule is kind of landed on this thing. And the camera really should be part of the capsule. The camera is going to go kind of with the capsule, right? So the capsule and the camera should be in the same spot. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this. I'm going to take the camera and just make it a child of the capsule. That's what we want to do there. All right, so there. So when I move this thing, we should see it. So if I bring the capsule up, let's just do that. Now notice that there's, yeah. Let me just go here and let everyone in. Let's also, in the camera itself, the camera controller, let's make sure you reset it. So in here in the reset, we go to the reset, so the camera and the capsule are and at least in the same space for now. And again, what you can do is, I'm just going to go in here. You obviously don't want the camera to be way down here. That doesn't make any sense, right? So you probably want to bring the capsule or the camera either there, and you definitely want to bring it outside so that the camera can see around what this thing can see. All right. Again, the frustum, if you notice where the frustum is, that's an important thing. You can kind of see it right there. So here, let's go like this, where the frustum is just kind of in front, right? And you can see that the position of the camera where it is. So if I run it, if I play it now, you know, obviously that it's going to look like I'm in a kind of in a first-person perspective right then, right? Mouse controls are a funny thing, and you know, that's the thing that you guys have to work on. It takes a long time to create a controller to work properly. So I'm not going to do that here right now, right? What I'm going to do, because it's going to take a long time to do it right, because that's probably part of the thing. But you can tell that this is kind of, it's going to make sense. Do I need 1,000 for my far plane? No, I probably don't need 1,000 for my far plane. I probably want to do something like 100. So that might be plenty of thing. It's going to give me my performance that I want too. So again, it's as opposed to, you know, what I had before, right? So if I run it now, again, you should see how that kind of goes down. And the great thing about this is my maze is allowing me to go in there. Okay, we'll get back to that. So again, what about a death plane? How do I create this death plane? There's a ton of ways to do this, but one of the easiest ways in Unity, I'm just going to bring this over here a little bit so you guys can see it more, is, you know, again, I like to use a cube or something like that. And at first I want to make it visible, but afterwards, and again, I don't have a very big maze right now, it's something like this. Let's just add a cube in Unity. So again, right click, I'm going to add in a 3D object cube. There it is. And it doesn't matter where it is. What I want to do is I want to scale it so on the x-axis it's very large, like 100. Okay, and on the y-axis or the z-axis is also very large, something like that, right? So it's gotta encompass, or, you know, kind of be at least as large as the maze itself. Okay, that's where it's going to happen, right? So one thing I'd like to do, just to separate it, let's make a material so we can see it when it's on. So I'm going to go and create a new material. Actually, I'll make a new folder first, the materials, because I like to be organized. Let's go materials. And on the materials, let's add a new material. Create a new material. And let's make this material, we'll call it red, right? And we'll make it red. We'll go into the albedo and we'll change it so that the material has a red color, right? So that's what it is, red color. You should be able to drag that in there. And so you can see it's a death plane. So it's a difference between whatever that was compared to what this is, right? Here's the death plane. The death plane is not going to show up, but what we want in the cube is you definitely want a collider by default, right? So if I was to move this thing, and let's just move my controller so it can fall down onto this thing, right? When my cube, or my player, and let's rename my capsule to player. And it also helps a lot when it comes to identification, to tag it as a player. You have different tags that are up here that you can choose. You can also make your custom tags. If I select my death plane, I can make my own custom tag. Again, forgive me if you know how to do all this stuff already. I'm just going to try and show you stuff. So here's death plane. So I can call it whatever I like. I can rename this thing too. So we'll call this death plane. And I can also tag it as a death plane. So if I wanted to identify it in different ways, I have options to do this now. And then later on, what I can do is I can just hide the mesh renderer, but the death plane will still be there, which is kind of the trick. So what I'll have left over is the box collider. If I don't have a mesh renderer, I still have a game object, right? So that's pretty good. Okay, so that's kind of how this works. Let's add a bit of a controller so I can just move back and fall. And so I can fall on the death plane and see what that looks like. So I'm going to make a new script. We're going to call this new script a player controller. And for the player, what we're going to do is we're going to add the player controller onto the player. So I'm just going to hide all this stuff for now, and we'll just say add player controller. Okay, and we'll just double click on this to start a Visual Studio project. And what I want to do, in just a simple way of getting input for now, I'm going to say if input dot get access. I'll say get input dot get access, and we'll say on the horizontal. Wow, come on, Visual Studio. On the horizontal, come on. Visual Studio is doing its thing right now. If my input.getAccess on the horizontal is greater than or equal to, let's say, 0.1f, so somewhere beyond the middle of the dead zone to the right, then what I want to do is do some kind of motion. So maybe something like move right, again. And again, I'm not going to do a full controller, especially with mouse and all that stuff. And this will be less than or equal to -1, -0.1. So on the left-hand side, as we do that, so let's say move to the left, right? And let's do, for vertical, I mean, that's kind of, you know, maybe I'll move forward and back. So we'll say this is be vertical, and this will be greater than 0.1. Again, we'll say that that is moving forward. And we'll do the same thing with this one, and we'll say vertical, and we'll move back. So move backwards. We got basic camera controls or player controls happening right now. The camera is just going to follow the player. Right now, it's not going to do much, right? So but I want to move it around a little bit. What I want to do with this one is I want to change my transform position, but I need some kind of basic speed. So let's add a speed here. So I'll say something like a public float, and we'll call it speed. And whatever that speed is, I can multiply it by delta time, but for now, I want to move right and left and kind of do that. So I'll say transform dot position. I want to, there's a couple ways to do this. I could add a velocity, right? So I could add a velocity to the position, or just change positions right now, which is kind of what I'm thinking. So equals to a new vector3 object, and what we'll say is we're going to move to the right. So you can use the vector3 right. So vector3 dot right, which will produce a the right kind of vector, right? So I'm going to add that in. I want to say my transform dot position plus equal to this vector3 right, and notice it says it's going to return a new vector3 object with where it says the x-axis is 1, right? And the reason why we can't do this is because you need to make it so that the new, if I was to do this, it's going to assign it to this position. I can't do that. I need to make it a new vector, right? So a couple ways to do this is I want to make the movement vector whatever I want. Let's just do it like this first. I'll say var move vector is equal to vector3 dot right, right? And then once I have vector3 dot right, well, still have to make a new vector. I guess I could just make it like this, and if that's the case, then I might as well not even bother with this. Sorry guys, just thinking out loud here as I'm going. I'll just do it. Okay, so this is to the right, x-axis, right? And I want to multiply that right now by my speed. So I'll multiply it by speed, which is a scalar. So it'll give some kind of movement to the right, and whatever that speed is, and maybe we can multiply it by delta time later on if we really want to. But for now, I just want to move to the right, and this one will move to the left. So this will be to the left, and I want to move this one so that it is moving forward. So moving forward again, remember that y is up in Unity compared to in Blender, right? So with y being up, then we care about the z-axis. So let's use positive 1 on the z-axis to move forward. And what we want to do is the same thing when it comes to moving backwards. Let's see how this works, if it does work at all. And we'll get some kind of motion altogether. All right, and you know what, one more. We'll put a jump. So we'll say if input.getAxis jump, if that is greater than or equal to 0.1f, so it's a greater than, just a slight jump, then I can add some force. Let's say we'll add some force. We'll say transform, well, we want the rigid body, right? So one of the things, in order for me to add force, I need a reference to the rigid body. So let's just do that. So we'll say private, and we'll say it's of type rigid body. We'll call this rigid body. And we'll say, well, rigid body is actually equals to get component rigid body, right? So that's what that'll be. So we can access what rigid body is, and I can just kind of go in there and say rigid body, hey rigid body, dot add force, and I want to add force in a particular vector. So I'll say new vector 3. This is where actually I can actually use the, if I'm not wrong, of vector 3 dot up, if I'm not wrong. Yes, vector 3 dot up, and I can multiply it by my speed again. All right, so that'll do it. So that's why I was using it wrong. Absolutely, you can ask any questions at all, Anthony. I'm just what I'm doing is I'm just kind of going through it to make sure that everything has some kind of purpose when we talk about stuff. So I want to show you the death plane, see if it works. All right, so let's are we supposed to build the EXE? Are you saying for Unity, Kennedy? You know what? I don't need the EXE, the actual build. Like, I'm not going to actually run your game necessarily through your EXE. If I need to, you're going to give me your GitHub repo anyway, so I can always download the project and run it and create it myself if I have questions. Okay, so let's see how this goes. It'll cut some time down for you too, you know, which is kind of the idea. All right, let's see if this is going to actually work. So if I press space, you know, as an example, or if I press my keys, oh yeah, one thing I need for sure is a speed. I didn't put a speed on the player object. Let's put a speed right now. We'll put some kind of value in here. I'll put a number 2 and see how that works. If it doesn't work, we'll certainly know. So there's my jumping. Now, one thing I don't have is I don't do any kind of detection for this, and I also don't care about if I fall over or not, right? So I'm not really limiting my movement, right? Jumping like what I just did, I'm falling forever, so I got to be very careful with what I did there because I'm multiplying. But maybe what I want to do is add force to the rigid body, just like I did before, right? So, but the jumping looks like it's pretty good. The one thing I need to do is constrain my motion so I don't fall over. And you can do that in the rigid body. So you can sit there and say, okay, well, I want in my constraints, I want to limit my rotation. Pretty much, I don't care about rotating my body. That's pretty good. That's a good thing. So I want to rotate it across the y-axis. Y-axis rotation, no problem. But x and z rotation, that would be bad. So let's limit the rotation so I don't rotate that way. And also, jumping is okay like this, but when I move, that's like way too fast. So way too much, right? So let's go back and change that controller. Instead of transform to position, let's just add force like we did before. I think that might be best. And we'll do something like this, and we'll also do, so that might be better, yeah. So we'll do something like rigid body. Oh God. Dot add force, and I want to add force in a particular direction. So we'll sit there and say to the right. So vector 3 dot right. As an example, and that'll be the same thing multiplied by speed, of course. what did I do here? Yeah, that was inside there. So I want to put those inside theirs. And that will be the thing that I want to do. Let's just do that instead and see how that works. And I'm not grounded yet. I think that might be best if I check to see if I'm grounded. You know, that kind of stuff as well. It's probably a good thing just to do it that way instead. So this is forward, and this will be back. Let's see how that works. Times speed. All right, and let's see how that goes now. So again, let's run that thing. So we'll just do a, so we can go forward, and go back, and we can fall, right? So this is where we fall into the death plane, right? Let's make the death plane visible right now so we can actually see that where the death plane is as I fall, right? So again, we'll move it, and do I go through? No, I'm pretty good, and I can move around. It's pretty jank right now. Because again, I'm not limiting my force, I'm not limiting my velocity, I'm not allowing myself to turn, and so on and so on. There's lots of stuff to do yet with the character controller to make sure that that first person control works at all. But we can see that it falls in the death plane. So when I fall in the death plane, I have a collision detection that can happen that can respawn me, let's say somewhere where I want on the maze. Absolutely, delta time is the way to go. Or you can also, another thing that I find is really tricky but really quick is inside of the player controller, what you can do is you can do a lerp, right? I know Dr. Hogue talked about lerping with you guys many times. So what I can do is I can kind of have my initial position and my final position as an example. So when I'm moving, and I can say that whatever that is, I can create a lerping value between one place and the next, right? Or I can multiply my velocity. I can say something like this as well. I can say that no matter what I'm doing, my rigid body, dot velocity, I can times equal that to 0.99, which will slow me down a lot. That'll be quite a bit of slowdown, right? So I won't go, as an example, forever. It'll slow me down when I push forward. If I keep pushing forward, yeah, it'll speed up to infinity, but that would be an issue. Okay, so let's try that out one more time, and then I'll move on to something that's more important than what I'm doing right now. All right, so even my falling down is pretty slow, right? Because what happens is I'm not going to fall, and the falling is not good, but I can float around because guess what? I don't care if I'm grounded right now. I don't have any controls for that. I'll also notice my Blender model is not perfect, right? It's got weird shadows and stuff like that around here, which is not necessarily what I want. All right, so let's keep going. So we've got a really janky controller, and because we did it in 2 seconds, and here is the maze. We talked about the death plane. Appropriate lighting, gravity, simple collision detection, triggers for checkpoints. We have a lot of this already, except that we can probably download some kind of skybox that's a little better than what I have if I really want to. Spawn points are really easy to create, and the way to do that is if I want a spawn point, it's just an empty, and when I land on the death plane, I can respawn myself to where I was. So let's go back and do that. Let's add an empty. So again, 3D object, right? And what I want is create an empty object. There it is. And what I want, let's reset that object back to 0, 0, 0, right? And I'm just going to zoom in there with fly controls. And let's put this kind of where the player is. So let's take a look where the player's controller is. So 28, 4, and 8.3. Let's put it a little bit lower than that as an example. So here's my game object. We'll call this spawn point. So 28. And what else is there for the player? 28, 4, and 8. 28, 4, and 8. 28, 4, and 8. And let's look at that spawn point in all of its glory. It's way over there, where we want it way over here. And we'll put it almost on top of the player right now, where the player is. So whenever we'll put a little higher actually. So when the player dies, he just kind of appears right there and goes down. And that's the spawn point. Let's get rid of that little thing. I don't want to think about this too much because it's going to affect me. So when I hit the death plane, it respawns, right? So Well, it should probably be part of the death plane that happens, right? So I'm going to get a collision with the death plane, or I can do it with the player. Either way, one of them has to know about the spawn point, right? My recommendation is it could even be a game controller or something like that. For now, let's make it as part of the death plane. So I'll make a new script. So create a new C# script called death plane controller, right? And what I want is for on collision enter. So void on collision enter, and I believe it's a collider. If not, we'll know in a second because it'll error out when it doesn't work. And let's just say a debug.log. Where when I hit, I want to kind of do the other .name, whatever the other's .name is. I want to print out. So let's just check to see if that collision works with the death plane for now. And what I do also is I want to get a reference to the spawn point. So I'll say that a public, we'll say a game object, which we'll call spawn point, and that public game object spawn point, I'm going to get a reference to that. So in the death plane itself, let's add the controller. So death plane controller, there we go. The death plane controller has a spawn point. I'm just going to pull that spawn point in here as a reference. There we go. And for now, all I want to know is, can I die? Can I go and hit the death plane, and will it give me a little message? It says the message parameter has to be type collision. Awesome. I like that. So it actually gave me a little bit of code hinting this time. It never used to. So let's go back to that. So it's collision instead of collider. There we go. Collision. Other.gameObject.name is what I want. Okay. And let's make that work. Let's run that thing and see what happens. So again, I fall. And yay, I got a collision. See, it says collision with object player, right? So cool. So that worked. So when I collide now with my death plane, I want to teleport back to my spawn point, right? So so whatever that game object is, my transform.position is going to be where the death plane's transform.position is. That's the trick here. So I'm going to say that on collision enter, whatever hits me, it's going to be the player, chances are. For now, I could, if there's moving objects or things that can fall on the death plane, then obviously I would do a check to see if it's the player that's hitting the death plane. But here I'm just going to do just the player itself. So I'm going to say, okay, well, other.transform.position is equal to the spawn point transform.position. Okay, so I'm kind of making so that when the player or anything else hits the death plane, then I want it to equal to wherever the spawn point was set. That's where the player is going to be. All right, let's try that out and see how crazy that can be. So, play, let's just back up a little bit, and then fall, and then boom, right? And it's going to keep doing that, right? So I can fall, and then boom, right? It's going to back to where I was before. Let's see, try this out again. There we go. And you can see I even carry forward my momentum, which is maybe not what I want to do. When I go to the spawn point, I want to set my velocity to 0. And you can do that, again, if you're making your own controller type, by in the death plane controller itself, you can sit there and say, okay, I want to set the other's velocity. So other dot rigid body dot velocity, right? I want to set that. And notice it says like other game object. So game object dot rigid body. I don't think I can do this, but I want to be able to set the velocity. Maybe I have to put together a function that sets the velocity to 0. But that's what I definitely want to do. I want to say, hey, other, because I know it's a type thing. I want to change the velocity, and I want to set that equal to a new vector 3 object, and we'll make it so that it's just 0. Why is that capitals? Okay, there we go. So if that's possible, I'm going to set the velocity to 0. So if I do fall, then I'm going to just stop, right? So I'm not going to carry on. I'm not going to carry my momentum. I'm just going to go back and boom, right? So if I had forward momentum like this, then I'm not going to have forward momentum when I get back there. it's good to go. All right, so so that is a little bit of the death plane, how that works. Lots of way to go. Anthony, you had a question. So I see your hand. What's your question? Do you want to come on the mic? You're live on YouTube, though, or you can wait till after. You had. Okay, no problem. Thanks. All right, so that was, we talked about checkpoints and triggers and all that kind of stuff. Triggers, that's pretty easy. Again, you can make a trigger collider. And the trigger collider will detect when you pass a certain place, and when you pass it, then you can trigger your plugin, which is what you want to do there, right? Okay, a main character controller must be included and can be either a first-person controller or a third-person controller with appropriate camera setup. You had to do this on your own, which is really great, and this is what we've been doing so far. The end scene should set up display player stats, and your end scene stats should have the player running time, and we talked about this with 5 checkpoints. Some people ask, can I do less than 5 checkpoints? Yeah, but you're just not going to get you're going to get less than full marks. That's what's going to happen. You need to have 5, and the reason for this is so your maze is large enough. That's why the 5 checkpoints are there more than anything else. Of course, you could make all your checkpoints in one place, but that would defeat the purpose. All right, and then you're going to do your DLL, which is really part 1 and that's the only part that we have apart from this, and the part 2 is your video. So that's kind of the stuff. Then there's a bunch of bonus opportunities that I've kind of put in there. An AI programmer's bonus for procedurally generating your maze. Well, that is super easy if I have a 3D tile. Super, super easy. The one challenge is I have to ensure that the random maze has at least one way out. That's a challenge. That can be a bit of an algorithm where you have a tile. If there's no way out, as an example, it doesn't connect in any way, then you can write an algorithm to swap tiles if you want to. Or what you can do is you can regenerate. You can calculate if there's a way from one place to the other by using a nav mesh. That's a hint on how to do that one. Sound specialist bonus, dynamic and or spatial sound and music. So this can happen when you're approaching a particular danger. You can change the music as an example. Again, you can use trigger colliders for this. You can also base this on players' health or that kind of thing. Anything that makes sense that changes the sound as you approach a hazard or you change state for the player. You could use Fmod or make your own sound manager. It's totally up to you for you to make this happen. Technical artist bonus, unique assets. So kind of what I did there with my 3D tiles. But obviously what we want to do is we want to include things like textures and that kind of stuff. That's what I'm looking for. The idea here is for you to have a creative design, which is what it should say. Animate one of your traps or hazards. That's really simple to do. You animate it in Blender and you bring it in. And once you bring it into Unity, the animation sticks. You can just trigger the animation in Unity from Blender or from the one you made in Blender. Or worst case, what you can have is you can have a base, and then what you can do is you can drag in a series of additional meshes, and with a different position, and that you can actually create an animation there by just dragging and dropping. It's quite easy to do. All right, graphics programmer's bonus. So this is a little bit more challenging. You would have to install either Shader Graph, which is an add-on for Unity, or write your own shader with HLSL, which we haven't really talked about how to do yet. But again, this is if you have a lot of incentive to do it on your own. C++ Guru's bonus. The logger is going to be would optimize and use smart pointers and a binary file, loading and saving to a binary file. And of course, the producer's bonus is tracking your progress. I got asked about this. Someone said, well, I want to do the producer's bonus, but it says burn down chart. What is that? Well, if you're going to do the producer's bonus, you need to produce a few things. It can't just be showing me your agile project. It means that you need a burn down chart, and that you should have already done that. For you to do the producer's bonus right now, it would be, I mean, you could create it, but it'd be literally very difficult to do at this point, right? So this is something that you would have had to have done near the beginning of this project in order for this to actually work properly. Okay, and then what I'm looking for is a working link to your GitHub repository, which you should have, a clean project, no garbage files with executable, ensure that your GitHub link includes your native C++ project, and like I showed you how to do that when we did our little plugin demo, and a video link with a 5-minute or thereabouts presentation. And I mean or thereabouts. Like if I have someone who's got their presentation and it's 8 minutes or 10 minutes, you know, it's probably still okay. If it's something like 25 minutes or half an hour, that's not okay, guys. All right. So, do we lose marks for a bad collision lets people go through the walls? Well, yeah, it's usability, Roderick. Right. So there shouldn't be something that prevents you. It shouldn't be that bad to let you go through the walls. Collision detection on the Unity side is quite easy to make happen. I highly recommend, if you have bad collision right now, what you can do on the Unity side is you can, especially for things that have a rigid body. So let's take a look at my player itself, right? My player is pretty dumb right now, right? But I have a rigid body, and right now my collision detection is set to discrete. If you set to continuous, it's a little bit more costly, but more accurate, and it'll stop you from doing a lot of that tunneling through stuff that you're probably used to doing right now. So example, if I had it set to discrete, and if I built up enough momentum, I could probably go right through the wall. You see that? Like, I'm still able to go right through the wall. Also, the collider itself, the collider boundary that I'm using here, right? You know, it's my camera. My camera is actually set so that it is it's outside of my player character, right? That's why it seems as if my object is going through the wall, right? So because my camera is set up, right? So the right thing to do obviously would be fix my camera, because my camera is kind of set up so that it is ahead of my player right now, right? So again, what you could do is you can make it so that the camera can't see certain things, right? So the camera maybe shouldn't see the player, and what you can do is you can put the player on a different layer, right? So right now the player is on a default layer, but I can put it on somewhere else. Like for example, the I don't know, the player layer as an example. So let's make a new layer. We'll call that layer the player layer, right? And I'll add the player to that layer, and I'll say yes, change children, so it can't see itself either. Okay, cool. So now the camera is on the player layer, right? So it can't see itself either. But the camera itself, what you can do with your culling mask, right? Right now it sees everything, but what you can say is it doesn't see the player layer, right? The player layer. So it sees everything else except for the player layer. That means it won't be able to see itself, right? As an example. And then what you can do, that's safely, you can put the camera now, you can tuck the camera into the player a little bit so that it won't be seen, it won't actually see the player itself. Okay, so it's kind of inside there now. All right, let's see how that looks. So again, we can notice that I can't see anything, but now if I go here, it's not going to go through the wall, right? It's not going to appear to go through the wall because the player layer is being hidden, right? Oh, that was cool. So I kind of hit the wall and I spun out. Woohoo! Right, because I can still spin out in this particular way. That's really dizzy because I didn't limit my movement or my spin. I didn't do that. So let's just go back into the rigid body. So I guess I don't want that either. I don't want my rigid body moving. I want my camera to rotate, but not my player. So my player is going to be locked. Again, there's tricks on how to do this too, where you don't have to lock everything. You can do it programmatically and stuff. But now at least I can go through the maze, and I'm not going to, fall down. I can't really look where I'm going yet, but that's okay. All right, so you can see that kind of works okay, and still my collision is still okay. It's not going to be bad, right? So hopefully that helped you a little bit. So yeah, this continuous collision detection is useful to put on the player, as opposed to discrete. Okay. Same thing goes with one thing that we don't have, because I can continuously move, is I want to tell if my player controller is grounded or not, and I'm sure you guys have figured that out, but let's add that in. So player controller, we'll make a Boolean, right? So we'll show this Boolean. We'll say public bool, right, is grounded, right? And by default, we can set is grounded to false. We'll say is grounded is equal to false. And then what we want to do is, there's some easy ways to do this, and some, so again, janky ways again. And we're trying to talk about jank here. Let's do it. So what we could do is we can sit there and say, okay, well, I'm going to detect on collision enter and on collision exit, right? So again, I'll say void on collision enter, and it'll be collision other. So when I enter, then I can say that as long as I collide with the ground, as an example. Now this is tricky because my walls are also the ground. There's all one, right? I haven't separated them right now. I just literally just dragged and drop something from Blender. What you could do is separate the walls and the floor layer in Blender so that they're totally different, and then you can only collide with the floor. But let's suppose now that I did that, I can say if I'm colliding with the floor, as an example, then I can say that is grounded is equal to true, right? And otherwise, if I'm not, void on collision exit, so when I'm not colliding, then I can say that is grounded is false. This is a real janky way to do it. Obviously, you want to use ray casting. It might be better than this, but at least it gives me something. And then I can do this. I can say, well, I don't want to move. I don't want to be able to jump. I want nothing unless I'm grounded. So I can say that, okay, if is grounded, and only if is grounded, then I want to be able to move. And I can take all this stuff, and sure, I'll take that too. And I'll put it in here. So this is kind of creating an is grounded situation. So if I run this now, a couple things are going to come up. If you look at the player object, you can see now that I have a checkbox. So if it's grounded or not, let's see if it detects me being grounded. So boom, there it is. It's grounded. So I can still jump, but notice that my jump is limited now, right? My jump force, my speed isn't that great. And what I want to put is a jump force, but I can't control can't control myself anymore when I'm falling. I can't move around because I'm not grounded. So a very simple way of knowing if it's grounded or not. I can also change this. I can add a jump force, which I don't have here, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that is some solutions to start you off in the right direction. That's what I was hoping here with this little video that we're making. Before I get going, it says an external document may be required to achieve some bonus opportunities as described above. Yeah, I mean, for example, if you're doing the producer's bonus, then it makes sense for you to have a little external document to help you map this out. Sometimes people will want to use this anyway to describe things like their math or something else that they've done for the player controller. I'm not going to force you to do it unless it otherwise says in here, like you need an external document. And it might say that in some of these things. Like, it says describe it in your demo video, right, as an example. And there might be something that says include an external document here for the technical artist bonus. Include an external document with your submission that lists all the assets that you created and their poly count, as an example. And there might be other places like that. The producer's bonus for sure would have something like that. Okay, so that is, I think, the exam at a very high level, as an example, with the requirements. And Nick had already gone through how to do the DLL with you. I think this is good. I know that some people had asked, not just one person, but okay, so Nick showed us how to do the total time, as an example, total runtime. But what he did was at each interval, he added to the total runtime. Is that okay? That's not what it says here. Yeah, it's okay. It doesn't matter to me how you do it. As an example, it really depends on that it's done or not, right? And then how do you move from one scene to the other? Let's just do that really quickly, and then we'll be done for the Unity part. Carter, you have a question before I move on. Talk to me. You can come on the mic if you want to. It's up to you. Although you'll be recorded on Unity. Okay, I sent it up there a bit. It's about the kill box. Okay, sorry. Just teleports me back one frame, then janks back. Any ideas on why that happens? It's been driving me crazy. When you say it teleports you back one frame, what do you mean by that? You have to display 5 different times for each checkpoint plus the final running time. Yes, you do. Sorry, so what do you mean by that, Carter? It says teleports back for one frame and then janks back. I don't know what you mean by that. Do you mean like it... Do you mean that it teleports you back and then you still have momentum? Single frame at the checkpoints position, then it goes back to the original position. That's weird. I'm not sure what you're doing there. The checkpoint itself, what you'd want to do is you want to move like falling at spawn point back to falling again. Oh, you're going to keep falling forever, you mean? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean that it'll go back to the original spot even after you've passed the checkpoint? Like, what do you mean by that? Maybe you want to come on the mic. It might be easier for us to figure out what you're saying. Because this is the thing, right? One of the challenges that that you have when you're creating your... Oh, okay, I see you coming inbound, but I don't hear you. Okay, I'll stop in a second. Yeah, go ahead, Carter.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, awesome. So basically, just what's happening is I have it so that when you hit the kill barrier, it sets the position of the player back to the checkpoints position. So let's say I fall down, I hit the kill barrier, it sends out the debug message that the collision happened.
Okay.
And it says that the player's coordinates are the same coordinates as the checkpoint. But visually, I'm still just falling through the barrier. And I'm not really sure what's going on.
Yeah, I'd have to debug that with you. So what we'll do is when I stop on YouTube, I'll get you to share your screen and we'll go through it and I'll help you out with it. Okay.
Okay.
Because that
awesome.
could be a lot of different things. That can mean that some part of your character is moved there, but not your character. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Right. Like remember, you have a camera. You probably have other stuff that's on your character. Maybe the camera's still falling. Right. You never know. Right. So.
That's part of the weird thing though, because sometimes it works.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's
weird.
It's really inconsistent.
Okay, we'll take a look at it when we pause for after this.
Right,
okay,
awesome.
so and I know other people have questions too off of YouTube. Let me just do a couple more things here. I'm not going to go more with the player controller. Again, there's lots of stuff you can do with the player controller. I can rotate my camera, which is what I want to do. So with my mouse, there's some little bits of code that you can use to basically point towards my mouse. My mouse itself, remember, I'm looking at it as an object in screen space right now. And what I want to do is get my mouse position in world space. So what is my mouse in world space? Well, I want to do a screen to world space conversion so that whatever I click on the screen I want to look towards that point, right? So that is the way to go. So again, it would be a detection on mouse move, right? Which is what I want to do. So when I move my mouse, when I click my mouse, a mouse click, there's going to be a place where I've clicked my mouse. I want the location of where I've clicked, or if I drag my mouse around, if I'm just moving my mouse around, as an example, a look kind of like have my camera look around. Then again, I have to translate my coordinate system from screen space to world space. Okay, so let's continue with this thing. So I have a scene right now. So here's my scenes, and let's make sure that it's actually labeled as scenes. And let's save my scene because I don't want this whole thing to crap out. So I want to make another scene. So I want to make a scene. And I want to transition from the start scene to the main scene. So let's make a start scene. Create a new scene. We'll call this start scene. as an example. And I know most of you figured this out, but I want to talk about it really briefly so you can look at one place instead of looking at 5 videos on YouTube on how to make this work. So I'm going to just transition to the scene, and I want to make a button happen. So I'm going to add a new UI element. We're going to add a new UI button, but it's going to be a button from TextMesh Pro. I like to use those. If you're going to use a button from TextMesh Pro, what you need to do is you're going to use import TMP essentials. There we go. And you're going to get, when I play the scene, if I was going to play the scene itself, so it's going to say scene. Let's rename this thing to start. Start. I didn't add it to the wrong scene. Yeah, let's try that again. So let's add a new button. So we'll add a UI. We'll make it a button. TextMesh Pro. We got it there. There's the button, right? And if I played the scene, then you're going to see that button's on the left. Right, there's the button right here, right? And why? How does this work? Well, what Unity does, it kind of abstracts this out. What you can do, what might be helpful, is to go into 2D mode for this one. And in 2D mode, you can see where you want to put the button anywhere you like on the screen, right? So I'm going to put this button kind of somewhere in the middle, let's say. If you want to be exactly in the middle, you can use the controls here. And if you press Alt and hit the middle, it'll take you right there in the middle of the scene. And let's make this button be the start button. So we'll rename this as start button. And once you rename it as a start button, when we click on it, we want this thing to start. I want to put a little script in the start button, so we'll go into scripts and we'll add a new script. We'll call this start button behavior. There we go. And in the start button behavior, I'm going to have a scripts. I'm going to have a void. It's got to be public. And I need a on start button clicked event that you can make to make buttons. And then what you want is, I want to use something called the scene manager. So using scene Unity engine dot scene management, and I want to say, hey scene manager, I want to load scene that's called main. Okay, so when I click the button, it's going to go to the main scene. In order for me to do this, I need to actually have everything loaded. In Unity, you have to kind of set up your build settings. And under build settings right now, there's no scenes that are loaded. And so what I'd like to do is describe to Unity how my project will build. I want to start with the start scene. Then I'm going to add the main scene, right? And so it'll start here, and main is now listed as part of the scene's structure. Think about this as your scene manager right here, right? And then when I do that, if I press the button, so I run this thing, and once the button is active, it's not active right now, it'll take me to the next scene. How do I do that? Well, the start button's here, and what I want to do is I want to add up this plus, so that I want to kind of indicate what the event handler is, and I want to drag and drop the start button, which is the start button itself, in here, and make sure that the start button itself has a script component. So we'll say start button behavior. There it is. And I'm going to choose the start button behaviors on start button click event. That's the one that's going to work for the start button. Okay, and if I press play, then now it's as simple as clicking it, and we're going to start the scene. There we go. So that's how that's how that whole transition can go. Pretty simple stuff, and it's like 2 seconds to do. Right now, if you don't like this and you want to add other additional things like panels, you want to change the skybox so it's black. For example, you can do that with, right now instead of skybox, you can say solid color. So for the start scene, let's make it so that the start scene looks like it's black. You know, as an example, I can totally do that, and that's no problem. Black button, click, and we're good to go, right? So it'll move from one thing to the other. One thing to note though is sometimes when you move from one scene to the other, what ends up happening is you have a loss of lighting, and sometimes you need to rebake or recalculate the lights. Just letting you know. All right, so that is my little project. I'm getting towards where I have to be. I have a lot more to go in terms of making this, right? Because I don't have my DLL. I don't have my player controller working very well. I don't have things moving around. I don't have sounds. I don't have music. I don't have anything, right? I mean, it's just really the beginning. Probably with the stuff that I'm building, I probably need a couple of hours from now in order for me to kick this into some kind of decent shape, right? Things to note are, even though you can't use scripts, anything that you download, there's nothing that stops you from looking at scripts that are out there that you can use, as long as you can describe what they do. Okay, so that's one of the requirements. One of the things that I kind of said in the notes here. All right, so let's go back to that PowerPoint. So we talked about where we are. We're doing the midterm test, and last week we did assignment 1, we released assignment 2, and so on. And I wanted to talk about a little bit of design patterns. One thing that I haven't had done for you, because we ran out of time, was a couple of design patterns that I want to put up for you. And chances are I'm working right now on a patterns video that basically is going to show you the couple of the patterns that you need for your assignment 1 part 2, right? Now that's another reason why I wanted to move it off to next Sunday, because I don't think you're going to have enough time without some guidance to do it properly. So I figured that instead of you doing a bunch of research on what the patterns are, I'll just kind of describe a couple of the patterns that you need. So on that, let's go to assignment 1 part 2, right, to get to where that is. So I'm going to go to that assignment. Let's take a group assignment 1 part 2. And it says you need a couple of patterns here. So there is a command pattern and a factory pattern. So I'm definitely going to talk about these two patterns in the video, the command pattern and the factory pattern. I'm also going to include things like UML and that kind of stuff. I will also briefly cover them again when we see each other again after the break. So I'll go through it again and I'll answer some questions. But I want to at least to give you this so you don't have to do your own research necessarily before you hand in your stuff. Okay, so I'll do that. The other optional design pattern, there's some really easy ones. This one says observer. Observer is not bad for things like dragging and dropping objects into the level editor. This is almost like an event handler, is what the observer pattern is like, where you subscribe to something that you're observing. Okay, so we'll talk about that. But you can also do things like the Singleton pattern. The Singleton is an optional pattern. It doesn't tell you which one to use, any one that you want. And the Singleton is super easy to kind of do. So I'll talk about at least 3 patterns that I recommend that are on the video. So please look for that. I'll send a note out, a notification that says, hey, the video's done. Take a look if you're interested. Or you can just do your own research on your own and pick any of the patterns, or do your own version of the command or factory. Factory is super easy as well. So this one is really, really easy. This one is going to be pretty easy when I do this one. The one that's more challenging to wrap your mind around is this one. How do you do undo and redo? How do I do that stuff? Making a factory for spawning in-game objects, that's like super easy to do. Super, super easy. Okay, but this one can be challenging. So we'll talk about how to do that in the video. Okay, you know how to do UML already, and you're going to get lots of practice with the DLL. And if you actually do the C++ Gurus bonus, then you almost have this part as well done for you and your team. So if one of you does that one in the exam, then you can almost lift that code out from the exam and use it right here. So that's pretty good in terms of getting your DLL done. And that was one of my things. I wanted to help you with, at least your assignment 1, part 2. With the exam is supposed to actually train you a little bit on getting good with Unity if you had a chance to look at Unity before. All right, so that's it for me and my dog and pony show. I'm not going to go and take up any more of your time. I've taken up enough already. Are there any questions that you want to share up on YouTube with anyone else that's watching? Yeah, you don't need any audio, Chris, but I probably would add it. I probably would add simple sounds and those kind of things, right? You know, because I'm saying what I would do. If it doesn't tell you that you need it, I'm not forcing you to do it, because, you know, again, it's a maze, right? And you have a limited amount of time. Copyrighted sounds are all okay. Anything you want to download that's not for commercial use, anything from anywhere, like in terms of assets, Roderick, are totally cool. I don't care, right? It's totally fine. Audio file with my cube backstory. Cool. I love it, Keelan. Anyone else have any questions around the midterm test? I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit because I know that there's some questions, and hopefully that clarified some things. Maybe it also added more things for you to think about. That's not exactly what I was hoping for, but I wanted to help you along with some of these things. I'm super excited to see the output that you're going to come up with for your maze. Some of you are going to be, I'm sure, very creative. Others are going to do what they have to do to pass, right? And that's totally fine too. But remember, this is a great opportunity for you guys to use this as a learning mechanism for your, just so that way you know how to use Unity. It's a commercial game engine, and this is a game engines course, right? So this is why we're doing it. Okay, any other questions before I stop recording and then take questions from the people that are here online with me? If you do, please put up your hand. Otherwise, I'm not going to know. This is for if you don't mind being recorded on YouTube. If you do, hold on for another minute or so. If no one asks a question, I'll just stop recording and then you can ask your questions. All right, so no one seems to have a question they want to share on YouTube. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'm going to share this video on Canvas. I'll be right back. And for those people who are celebrating Thanksgiving this weekend, enjoy. Good luck. I know that Ontario is thinking about locking down as we go into a second wave of COVID. I know that they're making an announcement around 2:30 today. So again, you know, use your best judgment when it comes to getting together with people. We want you to be healthy as we move forward, but also happy as you enjoy maybe some time with family and friends. All right, so good luck, and we'll see you when you come back from break. So there's no class next week, of course, because we're on mid-semester break, but the week after we'll see you, and then hopefully everything will be marked and ready to go for you guys, so that way we can start the second half of semester, which is going to be very busy together. Okay, so see you then.